Hi, friends. Welcome to the 10th Holy Night. My name is DeSutter. I'm a certified soul level astrologer. I did a 2.5 year training program through the College of Visionaries and Wizards with Mark Borax, who's a master soul level astrologer. And what I'm sharing with you tonight for the 10th Holy Night comes from a transcript from Ellias Lonsdale, who was Mark Borax's teacher and the progenitor of Star Genesis. So, without further ado, here we go. So, the 10th holy night is the sign of Libra, and this one is a solar eclipse at 22º Libra. We had a lunar eclipse on the 5th holy night, the Wesak moon, the Buddha moon, and now we're moving into a solar eclipse. And if someone who's listening can just let me know if my sound is good, I would so appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so the degree of this eclipse is an ancient glass vial, perfectly preserved. An ancient glass vial, perfectly preserved. When you're in a solar eclipse, who you are being, the very thing that Elias was just invoking when he was working with Uranus last night, is open to question, is up in the air. You don't feel particularly clear about who you are and what you're doing. Not even the person like me, who's usually in the Uranian wakefulness. What do you do instead? It depends. It depends on how hard you fall for what the solar eclipse is tempting you to fall for. What it wants you to do is to wander off your path into a secondary state of mind in which everything is up for grabs, in which anything can be anything and nothing is entirely clear. And if you go for that state, you will be in the opposite space from the Uranian consciousness that was described in last night's Holy Night. You'll be in this thing where nothing quite makes sense to you. Nothing adds up, and you're thrown out of your own essential being into all these mind states. However, an eclipse is not entering a state or condition. It's entering a process. It's entering a test and a trial and an initiation. It may start out that way, but it doesn't stay that way. Unless you're paying no attention whatsoever to inner subtle cues and you're just taking everything from the outermost level. If you're not, if you're doing what people on this call are doing, what happens is you sense the wobble. You sense the wobble, and you have, as in the image of 22 Libra, you have this part of you that remembers clearly that you haven't always been in a wobble and that you don't have to get too carried away with the wobble, but you can tap the wobble for a phase of growth, a phase of change. You can go through something, and it's crucial, the go through something. It's not something to just say, wow, I'm entering a wobble. I shouldn't be in this space. I think I'll correct for it and then I'll be okay and then we'll just carry on as usual. If we do things like that, we're really not getting it. And I know that a lot of spiritually oriented people actually do that. It's one of the reasons that I don't particularly identify with being a spiritually oriented person or any other group whatsoever, because that's not the point at all. Now I'm going to illustrate this excruciatingly right now through a biographical detail that's more than a detail. When I was 11 years old, I had a progressed new moon in 29 degrees Taurus and entered into an adolescence that was all about, it was an eclipse. And it was all about, what do you do when you're suddenly at 11 and 12 years old thrown into an eclipse space? So I dealt with that in the way that I could deal with that at that age. And I won't go into that, but just to say that had predisposed me to be extremely oriented towards disoriented mind states because I was in a distorted mind state for years and years. It didn't seem like that to me, of course. I thought it made perfect sense. It always seems like that. But in retrospect, I was off. I was off center. I was off. I was confused. I was fragmented. Well, I learned it. I got through it. And then, almost on my 26th birthday, I had a progressed full moon, a lunar eclipse in 13 degrees Sagittarius, and had another phase of incredible disorientation and confusion, but a very, very different one. I won't try to differentiate between those two states. I'm going to throw it all together and say, and this is pretty wild to do it this way, but this is very dramatically effective to the way my destiny works. From 11 years old until I was in my early 40s, so for 30 years, I was eclipsed. And I was eclipsed first under the sun and then later under the moon, or vice versa. And the whole thing was putting it all together. What was the problem? There wasn't a problem. There was just that was where I was just at. But the thing was that I could not catch my breath that entire time, nor did I realize what that problem was. It's only now that I can get it because after that in my 40s, I took on a completely different way of being that I've been in ever since. As soon as I could have a lunation cycle that wasn't an eclipse. However, I really, authentically, am so grateful for the time from 11 to 41 years old or 42. I'm so grateful for it. Why? The whole point of that eclipse is because you see, the person I was at 11 years old had no business growing up, had no business becoming me, had no business waking up in any measure whatsoever. He was lost, but he didn't know he was lost. So he had to create these eclipses so that the lostness could be intense enough and deep enough and profound enough that he could play out being lost. Not that he knew that that's what it was, but it was. He could play it out to the hilt. He could build all his relationships around being lost. He could build his school experience about being lost, his whole relation to the culture and the future and to the past. Everything was in that. It was a wonderful thing to be lost. It was a wonderful thing to be off my path because only then could I get on my path afterwards and I would always be grateful for it. One thing that I've learned after that is never take anything for granted. Never assume that any state you're in will perpetuate itself or get better. Never. And that hunger and thirst and raw fervor that left me with is a huge bonus from my eclipses. But what state? When I say I was confused and I was lost and I was fragmented, I was this, what was it really like? Because the important thing with these things is not to just say general stuff about it, but to really get it across because we're going through eclipses all the time and we go in and out of these states. And then, just so that you know, there's about a page where Ellias got muted and was talking, and there was all this confusion. And they were saying, like, that he was manifesting actually the sense of what it was like to be eclipsed, right? He actually demonstrated it by getting knocked off of the call that he was leading. And then he comes back on and he says, let's get back into it. What I was just talking about, hopefully you didn't miss too much, was what are the telltale signs? I was saying we can change this. Usually we don't know that we are in an eclipse. We don't know that we're off center. We don't know that we've wandered away from being grounded, being present, being here. But there are ways to know what that is. And I've learned to do that. The way I know that I'm in some kind of lunar haze, some kind of lunar fog, some kind of lunar vapors, which does happen for sure, is I sense that I'm not myself and that what I'm saying rings hollow. What I'm doing doesn't feel right. People around me look at me funny. The world I'm in isn't in harmony or in sync with the world outside. And I sense this because we have a delicate ego mind, all of us, including me, and we can't deal with excessive self knowledge too fast. I don't just sort of bombard myself with this critical mind kind of message saying, hey, there's something off with you. You better check it out and get on. I don't do it that way at all. I kind of I let myself drop into a space where I just question why I'm feeling a certain way, why I'm saying certain things, doing certain things. I let it kind of sit there. I contemplate it. I slow it down. I deepen it. I drop into it. And almost always what happens is that I discover that I am emotionally out of whack, or physically out of whack, or mentally out of whack, or some combination. And that it isn't something that's out of control. It isn't something that I can't do anything about. But it is something that demands urgent action. And usually for me, the urgent action is very small and very modest and doesn't disturb me or anybody else too much. And what it is, I become aware. Now, this is the part that's a little bit eerie, and I have to warn you. What happens is I just know that I don't have to be negative. This is the thing. I really wish I could get this across to other people. Occasionally I can. It's very hard to do. We're all so well defended these days. But I get it that I'm being negative. And there's no reason to be negative, that I'm being disconnected and it's not going to do me any good or anybody else any good. And that the only reason that is happening is that I've sort of fallen under a negative influence. There are suggestive beings and worlds that like to play under the moon. And they do. They play under the moon. So they're mischievous, playful beings that have kind of grabbed my attention, taken over my energy, and are kind of spinning me into a state of confusion and lack of vital presence. And I don't want to stay there. Now, here's the bad news. Humanity collectively so far under the moon these days, or over the moon, that these states are often continuous. I'm describing it as just when the eclipse happens. But if you're really eclipsed, you're eclipsed all the time. And that's why, here's an example. When the younger Bush president, the younger Bush, was starting the incredible war in the Middle East in early 1991, I was so upset about that war that I placed myself psychically inside of the world in Washington, D.C., to check out how he could do this crazy stuff. This is the only time I've ever done this. It's not a good thing to do, as I found out. And so I was in Washington, D.C., in his world at the White House for about 10 minutes, and during that time, I experienced that there was so much negativity in the atmosphere and so much complete disconnection that there was no way that this man was supposed to be president. There's no way that this man who was supposed to be president could possibly have any idea what he was doing. He was just inundated with dark spirits. They were everywhere. It was just a bugged world, a completely bugged world. It was really startling to me. I was shocked. I didn't even know what to do with it. This was a long time ago. This was before we got so savvy about these things. And I just realized, oh, the leadership of the country, the leadership of the world is under a dark star, is under the moon, over the moon. There's no actual, Bush isn't even there. There's nobody home. And every president since has been like that. And there is this way that when eclipse energy takes over the world, nobody knows any longer that it's eclipse energy. But because I've been working on these things intensively since I was 11 years old and devoted 3 decades from 11 to early 40s in the eclipse state all the time, I know the difference. I know it absolutely clearly what the difference is. What is the difference? When we're under an eclipse state of consciousness, we are being supplanted, at least momentarily, depending by other forces than us. And we think it's us. We assume it must be us because here it looks like it is. It seems like it is, but it isn't us. It isn't real. It's like a cartoon. It's like some kind of strange, bad story. And here's the oddest part. Because the moon also rules over childhood, you always have a healthy child in you, no matter what your childhood was like. You have a healthy child in you that feels these things and knows these things. For me, that's very prominent. And so, that healthy child in me, even when I'm most far gone, says, not in words, but vibrationally underneath, oh, we're going to get through this. This is just this. This is just that. This is just this bad influence. This is just a weird thing going on here. And I'm saying to you that you have to learn to listen to the healthy child in you and to follow their instructions because they always know. And they have friends who are not in some weird state, who are real friends, who will support their reflection. And if I have a happy child, sorry, I'm having a little technical difficulty. Okay, there we go. And if I have a healthy child, I have to find my space here again. Okay. And they have friends who are not in some weird state, who are real friends, who will support their reflection. And if I didn't have a healthy child in me who could usher me through these states, I would be in pretty bad shape. And I've come to see that everybody has them. And most people don't listen to that one in them because the culture has conveyed in a very sophisticated and loaded and detrimental fashion that if you listen to that one, you're going to be getting a bum steer. You're going to be going off the deep end because your healthy child is utterly unimpressed with authorities and is not caught up in all these socialized behaviors and basically has an independent vantage point. Every one of us has in our moon seer a vibrant voice that knows better. It usually works in our subconscious mind, not consciously, and it usually allows us to steer clear of what our conscious mind is constantly doing. If we didn't have something like that, our conscious mind really would do what he or she threatens to do all the time, which is run us ragged. But if you notice, your mind doesn't get to do that, not to the extent it would like, because this beautiful, tuned in entity that was who you were when you were little actually gets the whole thing, actually knows all of this, knows it backwards and forwards, inside and out. You may remember that when you were small, you were like that you got the whole thing. You knew what everybody was doing and why they were doing it, and you weren't impressed. For me, it was so strong that way that I can't even imagine my life without it. I can't even picture it. And this is Anne, and I'm just speaking from my experience. I remember that as a child. I remember one of the things that I remember really prominently was, I was always told as a child, don't lie. And what I noticed is whenever I was in mostly social situations with adults, that they were lying. They were lying a lot. And it was really disturbing to me and really confusing to me. And for a while I would say, but you're not telling the truth. And I would get in so much trouble every time. I can remember this period of time as a child that every time we would leave a party or leave some kind of social thing, I was in trouble the moment we got in the car. I was sometimes getting my mouth washed out with soap because I was telling the truth. And it wasn't okay to do that. Now, mind you, I liked to stir the pot at that age. I was a little ornery, so I was telling the truth in a way that was like kind of poking at people, right? And so it wasn't just that I was telling the truth, it was that the way that I was doing it was done with an intention of agitating others. Um, and so I remember that part about being a child very, very distinctly. Um, I also remember my first day of kindergarten, and some of you know me, have heard me tell this story, but I was so excited to go to school and start to grow up. Remember how you're a kid and you want to grow up and you want to get older and you want to be one of the big kids and one of the adults? Little do we know, right? And I was so excited to go to school and start to be a big kid and go to school. And about halfway through my first day of kindergarten, I had this realization: I'm in prison. This is prison. And I'm stuck here. And I have to do this for the next 13 years. And there's no way out. And I remember just being devastated that I was going to have to go through this whole experience of school and it was going to suck. And I knew that I was screwed, right? And I remember that realization and pretending to be a kid and pretending that it was all fun and it was all good on the outside. Well, on the inside, I was just not heartbroken, just kind of flattened. And I remember getting home on the school bus, my mom asking me about my day, lying to her and pretending I'd learned how to lie by this time. I'd learned that lying was really helpful, pretending that my day was fine, and then going to the woods to play down at the creek. I grew up on a farm, and throwing myself on the earth and just sobbing on the earth at the age of 5 or 6, however old you are in kindergarten, because I knew I was stuck for all this time and there was no way out but through. And that part of my child knew exactly what was going on, right? So back to Ellias and what he says. And so I invite you to remember, what do you remember about your child who knew what was going on, who could see through what was happening? And welcome that part of yourself um, back into yourself if it's not already very intact. It's a very helpful part of ourselves. And so back to Elias. He says, and so an eclipse is when we start to hang out with the wrong crowd and we need to kind of listen to our authentic voice within and realize that we don't need to hang out with the wrong crowd. We can kind of just nudge ourselves over here to where we're in flow with life again and we're in sync with our destiny and everything does make sense. And I'm convinced that the change that I prophesied in this class that's going to happen with Pluto going into Aquarius and all that, that change, or that's going to be the start of it, that change is based on this, that actually Saturn in Pisces and Pluto in Aquarius will combine to give us an inside early access point to where we can listen much more clearly and plainly and steadily and rhythmically to these voices inside that have our best real interests at heart. And I'm just going to note here for those of you that haven't, that last few sentences didn't make sense about Pluto and about Saturn. Those are some of the earlier holy nights that we've been doing. I think they might be holy night 2 and 3, perhaps. So if you're curious about that, you can go back and listen to those, either here on Facebook or on my YouTube channel. Um, so I'm going to repeat this last part of the sentences and then give you the final sentence of the transcript, where we can listen much more plainly and clearly and steadily and rhythmically to these voices inside that have our real best interests at heart. And we don't have to be constantly tuning into crazy channels that sound like they're robotic, because they are, and trying to tell us constantly that you are a prisoner of a world that is taking you down when you don't have to go that way. So those are Ellias's instructions about how to situate yourself with an eclipse. And those, I would say, are good instructions for any eclipse and for the feeling of being eclipsed in our lives. And I thank you for joining me for this 10th Holy Night. And tomorrow will be the 11th Holy Night. And in the 11th Holy Night, we will be in the sign of Scorpio, and we will be looking at Saturn going direct in 1 degree Pisces. And that will be the culmination of this whole first wave of Saturn in Pisces. So that's going to be a potent one. And I look forward to being with you tomorrow evening. And I bid you farewell and thank you so much for joining.